2 days before our 10th anniversary, my wife casually told me she forgot. She had work plans. Little did she know, I was ready to make her regret it all. I'd been looking forward to our 10th anniversary for months. 10 years together. It felt like something worth celebrating, something worth fighting for. I wanted it to be special. I booked a table at our favorite restaurant, the one where we had our first fancy date. I even called ahead to request the same wine we'd shared that night. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a chance to remind each other why we fell in love in the first place. Things had been rough between us lately. She was always busy with work, late nights, urgent calls, business trips. I told myself it was just a phase, that we'd find our way back to each other. This anniversary felt like the perfect opportunity to reconnect, hit pause on everything else, and focus on us. 2 days before the big night, I brought it up casually after dinner. I've made plans for Saturday, I said excitedly. I think you'll love it. She looked up from her phone, her expression blank. Plans for what? Our anniversary, I said, a little surprised she didn't already know. Saturday marks 10 years, remember? Her face twisted into something like guilt. Oh, she said, putting her phone down. I completely forgot. I won't be here. I'm traveling for work this weekend. It took me a moment to process what she'd said. You forgot? I asked, my voice quiet. It's our 10th anniversary. She shrugged. I know, but I can't cancel this trip. It's important. My chest tightened. This wasn't the first time she'd put her job ahead of us. But this? Forgetting our anniversary, brushing it off like it didn't matter? It hurt in a way I hadn't expected. This isn't just another weekend, Ashley. It's our weekend. Can't you reschedule? She shook her head. You're overreacting. It's just one night. We can celebrate another time. Her words stung. But what hurt more was the way she said them, so casual, like it didn't mean anything. Like I didn't mean anything. For years, I'd let moments like this slide. I'd made excuses for her, telling myself she was busy, that things would get better. But this time, something inside me snapped. No, I said firmly. You're not going anywhere this weekend. You're staying, and we're celebrating together. She raised an eyebrow like she couldn't believe I was actually standing up to her. Then she let out a dismissive laugh. Don't be ridiculous, she said. I can't just cancel. This is work. Ashley, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, if you leave, don't expect me to wait around anymore. I'm done being your second priority. She rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic, she said, brushing me off. We'll talk about this later. The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered. The following day, I kept hoping she'd change her mind, that she'd realize how important this was to me, to us. But on Friday, I watched as she packed her suitcase, kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong, and walked out the door. That night, sitting alone in the house, it all hit me. This wasn't just about the anniversary. This was about years of being taken for granted, of feeling like I didn't matter. I'd spent so long holding on to the idea of us, but maybe there wasn't an us anymore. She came back late on Sunday night. I'd been sitting in the living room, pretending to watch TV, but really, I'd just been waiting for her. Hey, I said, trying to gauge her mood. She barely glanced in my direction as she headed towards the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of water. Hey, she replied, her voice flat. I watched her, waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, anything, but it never came. I took a deep breath and kept my voice steady. We need to talk, she sighed, finally turning to look at me. Can this wait? I've had a long weekend. No, I said firmly. It can't. Ashley, our marriage is over. Her expression didn't change at first, like she didn't quite process what I just said. Then she smirked. Oh, really? Is that what you want? Fine, James. But just so you know, if you take this to court, I'll take everything. Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. She didn't ask why, didn't try to apologize, didn't even act surprised. It was all about what she could take. For years, I'd let her do whatever she wanted, but in that moment, I knew I couldn't let her walk over me anymore. The weeks that followed were hell. We were still living under the same roof, but it felt like a war zone. She acted as if nothing had happened, ignoring me most of the time and treating the house like a hotel. When we did talk, it was always about dividing assets, and every conversation turned into a fight. She wanted everything: the house, the car, even my savings. She didn't care about being fair. She just wanted to win. I hated how messy it was getting. Part of me still cared about her, about us. But every time she laughed off my suggestions or refused to compromise, that part of me grew smaller. I felt like I was fighting a stranger, not the woman I'd once loved. One afternoon, my lawyer sat me down and said something that stuck with me. "James, if she's playing dirty, you need to protect yourself. Hire a private investigator. See if there's anything you can use in court." At first, I resisted. The idea of spying on her felt wrong, like I was sinking to her level. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't have a choice. If she was willing to take everything from me without a second thought, I needed to know if there was more to the story, if there was something she was hiding. Reluctantly, I agreed. It wasn't an easy decision. Despite everything, a part of me still loved her, or maybe just the idea of her, the person I thought she was. But love wasn't enough to justify letting her destroy my life. I had to protect what little I had left. So I made the call. It had been a few weeks since I'd hired the private investigator. To be honest, I still wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea. But my lawyer made it clear. If I wanted to protect myself from a messy divorce and avoid losing everything, I needed evidence. Hard evidence. When the PI finally came back with his findings, I wasn't ready for what he had to say. He handed me a folder thick with reports, photos, and receipts. The folder was packed with damning details. He dug into her work trips, those same business trips she claimed were vital to her career. The truth? They weren't just work trips. They were excuses to spend time with her boss. Colleagues had already been whispering about their relationship for months, apparently. Some even joked about how obvious it was. But it wasn't just rumors. The PI had actual proof. Hotel records show they booked the same room on multiple trips. CCTV images of them entering and leaving the room together at odd hours, holding hands, and even sharing a kiss in the hotel lobby. I have no idea how he managed to get those images, but the private investigator, sensing I wasn't processing everything, brought me back to the present. "This is enough to build your case," he said. "But if you want to be absolutely bulletproof, I suggest we catch them in the act again. Something recent." At first, I wasn't sure. I already had so much evidence. But the thought of her walking away from this with sympathy, or worse, with half of everything I'd worked for, it pushed me to agree. We needed to add more evidence. Over the next couple of weeks, her behavior got worse. She'd started coming home later and later, sometimes not at all. She barely even tried to hide it. The phone calls were the most obvious. She'd step outside to take them, lowering her voice, laughing in a way that felt intimate. I didn't need to hear the words to know who she was talking to. Her disrespect was blatant. Then it happened. The PI called me one evening. He'd been following her all day and finally caught her meeting her boss at a private lounge. They weren't exactly subtle. The photos showed them sitting far too close, whispering, touching, completely oblivious to the people around them. When I saw the photos, something in me snapped. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. She wasn't the person I thought she was. And now, I had the proof to make sure she couldn't pretend otherwise. I waited until she came home that evening. I was sitting at the dining table, the private investigator's photos and reports laid out in front of me like pieces of a puzzle I had finally solved. She barely glanced at me before heading toward the stairs. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. It wasn't a request. She paused, her hand on the railing. "Can it wait? I've had a long day." "No, it can't." That got her attention. She turned around, her eyes narrowing as she walked back toward the table. "What's this about?" I motioned to the documents. Take a seat? She hesitated, then sat down across from me. I slid the first set of photos toward her, images of her and her boss, Marcus, entering a hotel together, timestamps glaring in the corner of each shot. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You tell me," I said. "These were taken during your work trips. Care to explain why you're checking into hotels with Marcus and not your colleagues?" Her face flushed, and she quickly pushed the photos aside. "This is ridiculous. You've been spying on me? Don't turn this around on me," I shot back. "Answer the question," she scoffed, folding her arms. "These are just business meetings. You're overreacting." I slid another sheet across the table, a detailed itinerary showing her room bookings, along with receipts for dinners and spa services for two. "Business meetings that involve sharing a hotel room?" I asked. "Because these dates match up with the nights you told me you were working late." Her confidence faltered, her eyes darting to the photos. "This isn't what it looks like." "Then tell me what it is," I said, leaning forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been lying to me for years." She opened her mouth to respond, but stopped when I placed one final piece of evidence on the table, a recent image of them in a secret location for lovers. Her face went pale. "Still going to tell me this is all business?" I asked. She didn't say anything, her silence louder than any excuse she could have made. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Here's how this is going to go. You're going to accept my divorce terms. That means you'll move out of this house and settle for less than half of what you own. And you'll do it quietly." Her head snapped up. "Why would I agree to that?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Because if you don't, I'll send all of this, the photos, the texts, the hotel records, to your workplace. And you know what that means for you and Marcus." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't try me," I said. "If your company doesn't fire you outright for violating their code of conduct, the rumors alone will destroy your reputation. And that's just the start. I'll make sure everyone we know sees these. Your friends, your family, even your parents. How do you think they'll react?" Her composure cracked, and for the first time, she looked genuinely scared. "You can't do this. This isn't fair." "Fair," I said, my voice rising. "You're talking to me about fair? After everything you've done?" She slumped in her chair, her eyes glistening with tears. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll sign the papers and move out," I added. She nodded reluctantly, her defiance gone. As I watched her walk away, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Part of me still loved her, but the damage was done. This was the only way to take back control of my life. And for the first time in years, I felt like I finally had it. Even after the divorce was finalized, I couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. Sure, the settlement was done, and she had agreed to move out of the house, but it wasn't enough. The betrayal kept eating at me. I knew I couldn't let it end there. About 2 months after the papers were signed, I decided to act. I still had the photos the private investigator had taken. I thought about it long and hard. I wasn't going to ruin her life out of spite, but I also wasn't going to let her walk away with her head held high while I was left picking up the pieces. So, I anonymously sent those photos to her workplace. I didn't need to explain anything. The images spoke for themselves. Her company had a strict policy against workplace relationships, especially between supervisors and subordinates. And honestly, considering how much of their work was happening in hotel rooms, I figured they'd want to know. It didn't take long for things to unravel. The company launched an internal investigation almost immediately. The higher-ups wanted to know how deep the misconduct went and whether any of it had affected their business. Within weeks, they suspended her and her boss, pending the outcome of the investigation. By the end of it, both of them were fired for violating company policies. I heard through mutual friends that her dismissal was the talk of the corporate network. Stories like this travel fast, and her reputation is destroyed. For someone like her who prided herself on her career and her achievements, losing that high-paying job was a massive blow. Worse, the rumors made it nearly impossible for her to find work at a similar level. As for me, I can't say it didn't hurt. Even though I knew I did the right thing, the whole experience was painful. You don't spend years loving someone, planning a future together, only to walk away without scars. But as much as it hurt, there was also a sense of justice. Now I look ahead and wonder what's next for me. Back when we were married, we both agreed not to have kids. At the time, I thought it was a mutual decision, but looking back, I realized it was more her choice than ours. She didn't want anything interfering with her career or her plans. And I went along with it because I thought it was what we both wanted. But now I think differently. I've started imagining a future where I'm with someone who values me, someone who doesn't see me as an afterthought or a stepping stone. Maybe one day I'll have a family of my own, a child with someone who wants to build a life together. It's strange to realize that something I thought I didn't want might be what I've been missing all along. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm not in a rush to figure everything out, but I know this much. I deserve better, and I'm done settling for less. What do you think? Was I justified in my actions? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.